Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. Hey everyone, how's everyone doing today? Doing all right? Hey, so my name is Alex, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about NFTs. But unlike hopefully a lot of the other presentations today, I'm going to be talking about NFTs from a technical level. I won't go too deep, too low level, but I want to just cover some of the basics about NFTs at a technical level. So everyone knows about the blockchain, right? So we know on the blockchain, right now, I'll start with EVM. EVM is one of the most popular blockchains for NFTs. So if anyone doesn't know, EVM is any blockchain that is compatible with basically ETH. So that would include L1 such as Ethereum, L2 such as Polygon, Arbitrum, Avalanche, so on and so forth. So I'll try to make it a bit basic, but as everyone knows, there are smart contracts on the blockchain, and basically what these smart contracts are is basically code that is immutable, supposedly, on the blockchain that keeps track of the data that is associated with whatever transaction that happens on the blockchain. This will include items such as NFTs, but also other things such as DeFi or any kind of, I think as the other presentation covered, like database on the blockchain. So some of the kind of key terminology I wanted to go over before we start is the idea of transactions, events, and logs. Whenever you do anything with your wallet on the blockchain, you basically create a transaction on the blockchain whenever you do any kind of gas paying operation. This transaction basically allows you to execute some of the code within the smart contracts on the blockchain. These transactions can simply just cost gas. It can also facilitate a transfer of ETH outside of gas. It could also facilitate a transfer of other tokens that are interacting with other smart contracts. On the blockchain itself, basically you have this idea of logs and events, which is basically a recorded kind of book of kind of everything that's happening. And events are kind of things that are fired off within smart contracts to signify kind of something that whoever has written the smart contract wants to know and index potentially. So let's talk a little bit about how this data works, right? So basically, you have a few different types of nodes. You have full nodes, archive nodes, and one of the other common ones is called a light node. Basically, I don't know if anyone here is really technologically familiar, but here I have two kind of node providers called Infura and Alchemy, which provides access for contract developers to hit the blockchain and basically query or interact with the blockchain. Typically, when you're querying or interacting with querying the blockchain, you would be querying something called a full node, which is kind of something that holds the last 128 blocks of the blockchain. The reason why you would query a full node and just only holding 128 blocks is due to the size constraints. You don't want to be querying something that has too much data in one go because it'll be incredibly slow and inefficient. For context, basically, this brings us to archive nodes, which is something that holds all the data on the blockchain. As we know, the data on the blockchain is immutable, and how you verify that is going through an archive node. Archive nodes, because they hold all of the data on the blockchain, they will continually grow in size from the start of the blockchain all the way to infinity, or whenever the blockchain, for example, collapses or anything else. Right now, for example, Ethereum, the archive node contains over, I believe, 6 or 7 terabytes of data. So why am I talking about all of this right now when we're talking about NFTs? Well, so everyone knows about NFT marketplaces. Everyone's wants to create an NFT, has created an NFT, has interacted with NFTs. But how do these NFTs work? Like, how do these marketplaces pick up these NFTs? That's kind of what I'm covering here today. Basically, on the blockchain, you don't get human readable data. You don't get to look at the blockchain directly and be like, hey, this is a CryptoPunk, and it just says CryptoPunk, and it has the image on the blockchain. That's not how the blockchain works. In the blockchain, you'll get basically a bunch of bytecode, which is this jumbled garbage over here on the side, which, if anyone here can read, well, good luck. But basically, we need to figure out how these marketplaces start and kind of understand which items are NFTs, which items are not NFTs, and how do they display it to your users, with this pretty image or video, asset, so on and so forth. So to take note of that, basically, you have this bytecode thing, and you have this idea of a transaction signature, event signatures, and hex data. So if anyone is familiar, for querying the blockchain, you can go to a website called etherscan.io, and this is for querying the Ethereum blockchain. And basically with this, you can look and find the transaction signature, which is based on the contract code, and find the hex data and events data that will tell you if something is an NFT. So why is this important? Well, this is important because if you make an NFT, you want, first of all, to be able to interact with your NFT on its own, and also potentially other marketplaces and other kind of whatever built on top of it to interact with your NFT. So this is why indexing is important. So on indexing, you have basically a few options. Let's say you make your own NFT and you only really care about indexing your own NFT and understanding the data relating to your own NFT. You can easily use the subgraph or do an analytics to kind of create some code just to specifically look at your own contract. But you probably also want marketplaces and other things to recognize. That's why we have some standards and called the ERC 721 standard and ERC 1155 standard. And these are standards that basically if you conform these standards, the marketplace will generally have a good idea of being able to pick up your NFT and display it in the way you want. And the reason why I bring this up is because it's something that, even though it sounds quite standards, like, hey, if we make it like this, people will recognize it. A lot of people don't do that. So if anyone here is looking into making NFTs for the first time, be it on a personal level or a company level, yeah, make sure you conform to these standards, and the marketplaces will pick them up. Here I also mentioned some ideas of non-conforming contracts, and those would include some contracts that don't actually conform to these standards, but perhaps they were created before the standards, or so on and so forth. And for those, a marketplace generally won't pick that up unless you really somehow become big enough. So an example of that would be like CryptoPunks. And then here at the bottom, I mentioned file types and IPFS, and this is just generally for the type of media that you put attached to your NFT. As everyone knows, when NFT started, you just have NFT images, the joke of JPEGs and everything else. But as things have progressed, people want more and more of different NFT types, including media such as video or audio, and these files tend to be quite large. And something to consider when doing that is, will this asset of yours display on a marketplace or a wallet or anything like that? So once again, to anyone considering making an NFT, just think about that for a second. You want the performance of your NFT to be good for your users, so just make sure that's considered. And then last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about security and sanitization. One thing that's really, really important with interacting with NFTs is that you guys understand the potential security implications. You could have items such as malicious metadata. It's technically possible that you click and save an NFT and it has something malicious and it executes something on your computer. Luckily, a lot of the wallets nowadays and websites that are legitimate prevent against this and have barriers against this. But just be really careful if you're interacting with an NFT you've never interacted with on their website. Another idea is a DDoS attack. This isn't really a user-facing thing, but basically I could say send 1 million spam NFT Polygon tokens to 1 million wallets that try to ping some website, and I could take down a website. And something that is user-facing is the idea of IP spoofing. So for example, if I make my NFT image point to something that I've written that will just ping locations, and you on your phone start hitting this NFT, if your wallet doesn't have the security features involved, now I suddenly know your location. So just be aware of all these things and make sure you choose a secure wallet. And last but not least, of phishing, which I think everyone's heard about, people getting phished all the time. So just be really, really careful with your wallet and your NFTs. So at the end here, I want to talk about kind of like next steps for anyone kind of considering getting into the technical space of NFTs, just making sure that you really truly understand the common standards, supported file types, and kind of moving forward, I think, as we all know, the NFT space continues to grow, from both like a real world perspective, but also from a technology standpoint. So I think it's important for us to come together as a community and think about potentially new standards for NFTs that support all of our new use cases, instead of just trying to make our own, adaptation of the existing ones. I know that was a lot, guys, but I would like to open up the floor for any questions, if anyone has any. Sorry, can you speak a bit louder? So sorry, I can't completely hear you. I think you're saying something about how the nodes are. You're saying something about nodes being centralized, or what? So nodes are still considered decentralized because the nodes are what the blockchain are, right? Like blockchains are run on are the nodes basically. And then you're talking about Solana, which is not an EVM blockchain, and Solana has like a different way of how the nodes are being run. Solana is actually a little bit more centralized in terms of how the validators work. So nodes themselves are the blockchain, right? Like the blockchain itself is composed of multiple nodes being run everywhere. Like the miners run a node basically. And then if we're talking about Solana, we can go more into that if you would like. But Solana NFTs are vastly different. I don't know if vastly is the right word, but very different technologically than like Ethereum NFTs. I don't know if that like completely answered your question, but kind of like a reversal there. Yes, you in the front. I don't have too many thoughts on those, unfortunately. Sorry. Anyone else have any questions? Yes, you in the front here. So yes, so I work at Coinbase and I work on the Coinbase wallet. I'm basically one of the technical leads on the NFT product within Coinbase wallet. On top of that, I've also been involved on working with NFTs on for Coinbase NFT as well. And yeah, just the technical side is kind of where I excel. You in the back over there, the one in the front, the guy in the front, the back. You're saying evolving? So I think there's a few things to note about the common standards. So right now I just talked about like the common token standards, but personally I would love to have like a common marketplace standard in EVM. Right now that doesn't exist. So for anyone trying to make a marketplace aggregator, they basically have to always keep in track of the updated marketplaces. So having a standard for that would be great. I know on like for example Solana you have Metaplex and kind of you have standards there. So something like that would be great. And then for token standards, I think the biggest headache for anyone working with tokens is always going to be getting your tokens to display, right? And the reason why it's really hard to get the tokens to display these days is, first of all, a lot of people don't conform to existing metadata. Um, and the other reason is because, once again, the file size. So maybe a token standard that's a little bit kind of more strict on how these things work will help you out. I'll take one last question over there, and I think the next person will come on. Yes. I'm not 100% sure on the timeline for the NFT marketplace. The Coinbase wallet itself has already integrated with Polygon, so we have full Polygon NFT support on Coinbase wallet. The Coinbase NFT side is looking into doing that already. I don't know the exact timeline on that. No, sorry. Right now, so what's it called? Coinbase Wallet has Polygon support, and we're looking into other ones as well. I don't know the exact timeline for Coinbase NFT, but I know Polygon is on the radar first, and then everything else, I don't know the timeline on. Okay. Thanks everyone, and yeah, I'll pass it on to the next person.
Hey there. So, my name's Harry. Nice to meet you guys. I, I am one of the co-founders and the CTO of OffChain Labs, which is the company building the Arbitrum blockchain. Super cool to see a big version of the logo on my shirt right behind me. And I'm excited to be here today to talk some about Arbitrum at a high level, some kind of diving into the tech, and then some in terms of how we as a layer 2 blockchain, think about sort of the complexities of NFT bridging. Let's see. Nope. There we go. So first off, just at a high level, for people who aren't too familiar, Arbitrum Rollup, we are a layer 2 blockchain, an optimistic rollup, which is a type of chain that is fully secured by Ethereum. But way nicer than Ethereum, we can offer significantly cheaper transactions, 10 to 50 times cheaper, and our security is derived from Ethereum. So rather than using kind of a completely separate blockchain, which will have various sorts of security assumptions you need to make, and have difficulties rather than using Ethereum, we really provide sort of much more an extension of Ethereum itself. And with that, as I said, cheap transactions that aren't dependent on expensive cryptography, that don't involve expensive execution on Ethereum, that really minimize those costs, that derive their security from Ethereum, and that allow the same Solidity or any other EVM-compatible language, same smart contract, same work you've done for any EVM chain, just working directly on Arbitrum. Let's see. So just a little bit about the ecosystem at a high level. And this is sort of why would you want to build your project on this chain? So there's a lot about it that kind of at the technical level is important, but I think that the ecosystem, especially from an NFT perspective, is one of the most important things because no project exists in a vacuum. They all exist alongside other elements in the ecosystem. So Arbitrum has a large amount of value blocked. It used to be, I think, around 4 billion. Now, with the market downturn, I think we're around 2. But that's the whole ecosystem, not just us. Our market share of the roll-up space in general, of the L2 space, is over 50%. So if you want to use Ethereum scaling solutions, you want to use Arbitrum, I would say. And there's a huge number of dApps and unique addresses already in the system that are there to use your product, to interact with, to anything you want. So next up, like just a bit more concretely on sort of one thing that I think a lot of projects care about the most, which is gas savings. As you can see here, just a direct comparison. Arbitrum on the left, let's see, yes, on the left, Ethereum on the right, showing our prices at around kind of on average around 10% or under the cost of using Ethereum. So huge savings. If you're on Ethereum today, it's I think the strongest argument to actually migrate. And just to look at sort of what the ecosystem looks like, who else is there. You could see a lot of logos that you're probably familiar with that you know from Ethereum, along with a really strong native ecosystem of projects who have developed and grown on Arbitrum as their home base and their main location. And in particular, I think in the NFT space, something we're really excited about is where other projects have seen kind of slowdowns in adoption, have seen decreases in sales. Arbitrum's only booming. So this data is a little out of date. We need to get a more up-to-date version of this. This is back from March. But you can see at that point, where most other chains were seeing volumes dropping, Arbitrum is growing enormously. I'm hitting the green button. And it's very easy to start using it today. You can use a number of centralized exchanges, decentralized bridges, fiat on-ramps, all to go directly to Arbitrum. You don't need to go through Ethereum or any other chain. You can just start directly. So a little bit just to kind of on the technical side about Arbitrum rollup versus sidechains, because a lot of the other alternative approaches to kind of getting this scaling are using these really alternate chains where kind of rather than deriving from Ethereum, rather than benefiting from the ecosystem Ethereum, from the security of Ethereum, you instead have an entire different ecosystem, an entire different chain. All Arbitrum data is posted to Ethereum, which means the actual metadata associated with your NFT is on Ethereum. Everything associated with Arbitrum could disappear, and that NFT would survive, which I think is really powerful, compared to other chains where if the nodes stop running, your data could just totally be gone. We have a bridge from Ethereum that is fully secure and fully validated. There's no extra multisig, there's no extra security assumptions needed in order to move your assets. The core system itself secures the bridge. And if you've seen in the news all of the various times that various bridges have hit security difficulties, have gotten hacked, you can see the value of having this base core bridge that's fully secured. Arbitrum uses fraud proofs. So what fraud proofs are is essentially some party says, hey, this is the new state of the chain. This is the next block. And anybody else has an opportunity to challenge. And those are enforced by Ethereum and can be disputed on Ethereum. Now, we have a lot, when there are longer segments, we go a lot more into how this works. And if you look online, there's going to be a lot more resources about this. But the core idea is that fundamentally, Ethereum is mediating a dispute and proving what's correct, as opposed to having essentially what comes down to voting, where if a group of validators turns malicious, they can just fully take your funds, which is kind of really, I'd say, a major issue. So where are we going with this? So right now, we've been aggressively working on Arbitrum Nitro, which is our next-gen technology, which we're going to upgrade Arbitrum 1, our main chain, to, and has a whole bunch of really exciting features. We're also very actively working on another piece of technology, which will be a separate chain using this technology called AnyTrust, which is cheaper and faster than kind of standard side chains, but at much, much lower cost than Arbitrum rollup itself. When you look at the transaction costs in Arbitrum, you could look at $1 or $2 and say that's very expensive or that's very cheap. And if you're in the DeFi space, it's very cheap. If you're in the gaming space, it's extremely expensive. And our AnyTrust technology is going to kind of target that problem for technologies that don't necessarily need quite the security of DeFi, but need to be cheaper and faster. And that's Nitro. So how Nitro works, essentially, there's a sequencing step where we order the transactions, we put them on chain, and then we execute them. And so here we have our sequencer. That's where the transactions are going to go to. Users will send those transactions, and it will put them in this order. Those transactions will then be executed. And so this is right now looking a lot like how how Ethereum would look. But then we're going to get into the bit that's different. Sorry, next. It's fun not being able to do the slides right. So the sequencer orders them, we execute them, they're L2 blocks, and then we get to the really important part next, which is we batch them, and we compress them, and we actually put those transactions on Ethereum. So we post them to Ethereum itself. And there we go. All right. So then, and sorry if we can click through all these. All right, I'm just going to keep talking because essentially what we add for messaging between chains is we have a contract called the inbox, which exists on Ethereum. And so that is just another source of transactions. And those just execute the transactions. And so where users send to the sequencer, the inbox contract, which is also goes into that same stream of transactions, picks up messages. And what this gives you is this powerful primitive, which is taking a contract on Ethereum and having it execute code on Arbitrum, which is what you need to build anything on top. And the biggest thing we can build with that is asset bridging. And so what bridging really is we have assets on Ethereum. We put them into escrow, so we lock them up. And then we mint a token on Arbitrum, an NFT, an ERC20, whatever it is, that could be redeemed for that asset on Ethereum. And there's a lot of things you can do with this. And there's a lot of capacity. And this is an area that I think the ecosystem is really still exploring what the right thing is. But I think there are a number of properties that are critically important, like having a canonical representation of each asset. So there's like ETH DAI on L1 is the same as DAI on L2. A CryptoPunk on L1 is the same as a CryptoPunk on L2. And that figuring out how to bridge is easy. Last slide. And then I'm mostly out of time here. But just to talk a little bit for a second about why this is so complicated. NFTs are a lot more complicated than ERC20s. There's complex metadata generation. It could be generative. It could be dynamic. It could be updatable. these things are not clean. And so if all the code is on Ethereum, how do you actually sort of reason through what should that asset on another chain look like? There are royalty standards, many different standards, and sort of figuring out how to carry those over onto a new chain is a really hard problem. And so I think over the coming months, year, I don't know how long, I hope it's soon, we're going to sort of craft much more serious and much more adopted standards that will kind of define this interface in a clean way. Because that's what we need to really be able to have your asset be portable on different chains. So there I will end, and thank you very much for listening.
All right. Hey, everybody. So we're now going to begin the track around DAOs, the future of DAOs,